Montana Territory. 1877, the wind rolled down from the Bitterroot Mountains like it carried bad news, and Elijah Prescott heard it before he saw her. He was mending the north fence when the stagecoach rolled in slow, dragging a swirl of dust behind it. Not many folks came out this way unless they were running from something or looking to start over. Elijah didn't care which it was anymore, so long as they did not steal his horses or burn his barn down. The driver called out, "Passenger for you, Mr. Prescott." Elijah wiped his hands on his trousers and walked up the slope toward the house. The woman stepping down from the coach was young, maybe 23. Her dress was plain but clean, bonnet tied too tight under her chin. She had a small satchel clutched in one hand and a child in the other, a little girl maybe 4 with tangled dark curls and wide eyes that looked like they had seen too much. "Elijah Prescott?" the woman asked, voice tight. "That's me," he said, tipping his hat. "You must be Adeline Voss." She nodded, but did not smile. "This is my daughter, Sadie." The girl pressed into her side, silent. Elijah had not expected a child. The letter from the preacher back in Helena had said the woman was widowed, quiet, and in need of a place to go. He had agreed to take her, and not out of pity, but because the house was too quiet most days and the land too big for one man to tend alone. "I got a room made up for you both," he said. "You must be tired." Adeline gave a stiff nod. "Thank you." She did not speak much that evening. Neither did Sadie. Elijah gave them space, letting them settle into the front bedroom while he worked on supper. Cornbread, beans, a little salt pork. He noticed Adeline watching from the doorway, her hands fidgeting with the edge of her sleeve. "I can cook," she offered. "You do not need to tonight," he said. "Long trip. Rest." But the next morning Elijah woke to the smell of something burning. He found her in the kitchen, smoke curling from the stove, a blackened mess in the skillet. "I was trying to make biscuits," she said quickly, face flushed. "I thought I remembered how." Sadie sat at the table with her chin in her hands, looking disappointed. Elijah grabbed the skillet and dumped it out back. When he came in, Adeline was scrubbing the counter like she was trying to erase the whole morning. "Hey," he said, voice low. "It is just food. No harm done." "I should know how," she muttered. "I was a wife before, a mother. I should know how to do this." Elijah did not know what to say to that, so he made eggs instead and poured Sadie a cup of milk. After breakfast, he saddled 2 horses and handed Adeline the reins. "You ever ride?" "Not in years." "Well," he said, helping her up, "you will remember fast." They rode the boundary line with Sadie tucked in front of him, her little hands gripping the horn of the saddle. The girl did not speak much, but she watched everything hawks overhead, the creek snaking through the grass, the way Elijah's horse moved steady beneath them. By the time the sun started down, Adeline's hair had come loose from her pins, and her cheeks were pink from the wind. She smiled once, just barely, when Sadie leaned her head back against Elijah's chest and sighed. That night she tried cooking again, this time just beans, and she burned them too. "I will get better," she said, frustrated. "I promise." "You do not have to," Elijah said gently, "but I want to. I want to give something back. You took us in when no one else would." He looked at her, then really looked. There was something about her eyes. She had built walls around herself, too many, but her voice cracked like someone who had held up too long and was just starting to fall apart. "You already gave me everything I needed," he said. She blinked. "What?" "You brought warmth into this house, laughter, even if soft, a child's voice. That is more than I had in a long time." Adeline opened her mouth, then closed it. Her eyes filled, but she blinked fast and looked away. It became a rhythm after that. She would try to cook, and Elijah would step in when it went wrong. Sadie would giggle when the bread turned to stone, or when the sugar got mixed with salt. Adeline stopped apologizing after a while, and Elijah noticed her shoulders weren't so tight all the time. She started humming when she brushed Sadie's hair. Sometimes she stood at the porch rail at dusk, watching the horizon like she was waiting for something. One night, as Elijah came in from the barn, he found her sitting by the fire, sewing badly but trying. Sadie was asleep in the rocker. "Do you ever miss him?" Elijah asked quietly. Adeline looked up. Her father, he nodded. She set the needle down. "He was not kind, not cruel, just cold. When he died, I did not feel much. That scared me." Elijah sat across from her. "You do not owe anyone guilt for surviving." Adeline's eyes met his. "What about you? You ever loved someone?" "Once," he said. "She died of fever, long time ago." Adeline reached across the small space between them and rested her hand on his. It was a small gesture, but real. "I am glad we came here," she said. "Even if I cannot cook," he chuckled low. "You make a rotten biscuit, but you are brave, and you are kind. That matters more." She did not pull her hand away. It was not a fast kind of falling in love. It was slow, like the way creek water smooths stone over months. But it was steady. By the end of the first week, Sadie wandered into Elijah's room in the morning to wake him up, and Adeline did not scold her. When Elijah lifted the girl into his arms, she tucked her head under his chin like it was where she belonged. That night, Adeline stood in the doorway of his room. "You sure about this?" she asked. He looked up from the book he was reading. "You mean all this?" She nodded. He set the book down. "I am more sure of you than anything else in my life." Adeline stepped inside. The lamp cast a soft glow on her face. She moved to the bed, sat beside him. He took her hand, this time fully, and kissed her knuckles. "You already gave me everything I needed," he whispered again. And this time, she believed him. A week after Adeline and Sadie arrived, the snow came early. Elijah had just finished stacking the last of the firewood near the porch when he looked up to see Adeline brushing snow off the rail with her sleeve. She squinted into the gray sky. Her cheeks were raw from the wind, and her hair had been tucked back beneath a knitted shawl he didn't recognize, likely something she'd mended from a forgotten bundle in the storage chest. "They said October snows were rare in Helena," she said. "Up here, the weather listens to no man," Elijah replied, drawing his coat tighter. "You and Sadie warm enough last night," Adeline nodded. "We kept the stove fed. She curled right up beside me." She hesitated, then added, "I've been meaning to ask what your plans are for winter." "Stay warm. Keep the cattle from freezing. Try not to break my neck hauling water." He stepped up beside her. "Why? I'd like to help, but not in the kitchen." Her voice was measured, but her eyes held something steadier than before. "I want to learn the work you do." Outside, he leaned against the railing, studying her face. "You sure? I won't be much use at first, but I want to earn my place." "You're already here," he said. "But I'll show you what I can." The next morning, Elijah handed her a pair of worn gloves and taught her how to check the water troughs for ice. She cracked through the surface with a short-handled axe, her movements unsure at first. He showed her how to use her weight, not her strength, and when she got it right, she gave a quiet, surprised laugh. Sadie watched from the barn doorway with the goat curled beside her, chewing on something she probably wasn't supposed to have. Adeline worked until her fingers stiffened and her sleeves were damp through. Elijah didn't stop her. He only stood nearby, silent unless she asked. When she sat on the feed barrel to catch her breath, he handed her a tin cup of hot coffee and said, "You're stubborn. That'll serve you well." She looked at him over the rim. "You don't think I'm foolish?" "No," he said. "I think you're trying to build something. That takes grit." That night, she sat near the hearth with her legs tucked beneath her, mending a ripped seam in one of Sadie's dresses. Elijah carved a length of kindling by the firelight. The air between them had changed, less careful, more shared. After a quiet stretch, Adeline spoke. When I was a girl, I used to think marriage meant safety. A roof, a name, someone to hold your hand. But it isn't always that. He didn't look up. What changed that for you? Life did. He laid the carving knife down. I won't ever raise my voice at you, or my hand. I keep my word. That's what I can offer. She met his eyes. What if I don't know how to be a wife anymore? Then don't be, just be you. The fire popped. Sadie stirred in her sleep on the cot in the corner. Adeline stood and crossed to the window. Snowflakes brushed the glass like ash. Do you think people can be made new? I think with time, Elijah said. Most things soften. She turned toward him. And you, did time soften you? He paused. I learned how to live without waiting for something to fix me. Adeline stepped closer. Maybe you weren't broken. He watched her quiet. That night she lingered in the doorway of his room again but didn't cross it. She only said, "Good night," voice low, and walked away with slow steps. The next day brought a wind that scraped the hills bare. Elijah saddled the mule and rode into town for supplies while Adeline stayed back to mind the place. When he returned, the smokehouse was open and the latch broken. He found her in the barn, hammering a new board across the door. She turned at the sound of his boots. "A coyote got in. I scared it off. You all right?" "I had the rifle, didn't need to use it." He stepped in, pulling off his gloves. "You handled it." She nodded once. I didn't shake. That evening, after Sadie had fallen asleep beside a stack of picture cards, Adeline sat across from Elijah at the table, a faint line between her brows. "I used to think peace was something you got when nothing bad ever happened again," she said. "But now I wonder if it's just having a place to go when it does." Elijah reached across the table, his hand settling over hers without hesitation. "You're safe here. Not because nothing breaks, but because we fix what does." Her eyes searched his face. "I want to stay. For good." "You already belong," he said. She stood slowly, moving to his side. Her hand rested on his shoulder, then slid down his arm until their fingers interlaced. He rose, wordless, and followed her into the quiet. By late November, the days shortened enough that dusk fell quick, like a door closing. The cold deepened too, not sharp like it had been, but low and bone deep, the kind that lingered inside even after the fire was built high. Adeline had taken to checking the traps Elijah set along the creek, bundled in Elijah's second coat that hung too loose on her shoulders. When she returned one morning with a pair of rabbits, she held them out without a word. Elijah nodded and took them, his hands brushing hers, rough against soft skin gone red from cold. "I'd like you to show me how to clean them," she said. He glanced at her, then led her out behind the barn where the snow had been packed flat from use. They worked in silence, his motions practiced, hers careful. She didn't flinch, didn't ask to stop. When they finished, Elijah wrapped the meat and handed it to her. "You can make stew from that," he said. "Might be better than beans for once." She gave a small huff. "Don't count on it." That night, the stew simmered slow, and while it lacked seasoning, it was hot and filled the house with something that wasn't smoke. Sadie scraped her bowl clean. Adeline didn't say anything, just looked over at Elijah once, eyes steady, then turned back to the fire. Later, after Sadie had been tucked into bed, Elijah stepped out to the porch to check the cloud line. He found Adeline already there, sitting on the top step, shawl wrapped tight, her breath showing in faint puffs. "I couldn't sleep," she said without turning. He sat beside her, boots creaking on the wood. "You used to live in town." "We did. After he passed, I worked sewing until the preacher told me about you." She looked down at her hands. "I didn't know if coming here was the end of something or the start." Elijah reached over, not touching her yet. "What's it feel like now?" She was quiet a long while, then, "Like I'm learning what it means to be wanted." He let his hand rest over hers. She didn't pull away. "I never had much use for words," he said, "but you belong here. not for what you do. Just for being. She turned her face to him, and for the first time he saw no guard there, only the slow, steady trust that had taken weeks to build. "I'm not afraid anymore," she said. He leaned in, slow, and kissed her chaste, careful, but real. When they pulled apart, she exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for years. They went inside hand in hand, not saying more. The next morning, Elijah found Sadie at the barn door peering out at the snow. "She wants a sled," Adeline said, stepping up beside him. "We've got planks." "I can fashion a runner." Adeline crouched to tie Sadie's boot. "She's never had one." He watched them, the woman and the child who had arrived with little more than weariness and silence. Now, Sadie laughed when the goat chewed on her bonnet, and Adeline hummed while sweeping ash from the hearth. He built the sled that afternoon, sawing and sanding while Sadie pointed and offered suggestions he couldn't make sense of. Adeline leaned against the fence, arms crossed, watching him with a look that wasn't admiration so much as quiet contentment. When it was done, the three of them took it to the hill near the tree line. Sadie squealed all the way down, her laughter echoing off the snow-draped pines. Adeline went next, gripping Elijah's arm tight as they slid down together. When they reached the bottom, breathless, she looked at him and said, "I never did this as a child. You're doing it now." That night, after Sadie had gone to sleep curled against the quilt Elijah's mother once sewed, Adeline stepped into his room without hesitation. "I don't want to stay in the other room anymore," she said. "If that's all right." He set aside the ledger he'd been updating. "It is." She lay down beside him, her head on his shoulder, fitting there like it had been waiting for a place to rest. He wrapped his arm around her, warm and sure. Outside, snow fell again, soft and constant. Inside, they stayed close, the quiet between them no longer empty but full of everything they hadn't needed to say. The cold settled into the valley like it belonged there, and with it came a stillness Elijah had only ever known in deep winter. The kind that quieted everything, even thought. Days passed marked by the rhythm of chores and soft voices in the house, the rising and falling of the fire's breath. Elijah found himself listening, more often than speaking, listening to the way Adeline hummed when she brushed Sadie's hair, to the clatter of her boots on the porch before dawn, to the way her breathing slowed beside him at night. One morning, after a long stretch of snow kept them indoors, Adeline stood at the table folding strips of cloth into neat piles. She didn't look up when Elijah entered, but her voice carried steady. "I've been thinking about starting a garden come spring." "If we stay that long," Elijah leaned his shoulder against the doorframe. "You plan on leaving?" Her hands paused. "No, but I've never had the right to assume I could stay anywhere before." "You're not just passing through," he said. "You can plant whatever you like." She nodded once, the motion small but certain. "I'd need to learn when to start seedlings. I never did it right before. The soil back near Helena was too rocky. We've got good earth here, black and deep. I'll show you where to dig." That afternoon, while Sadie napped curled against the dog on the braided rug, Adeline brought out a bundle wrapped in faded muslin. She laid it on the table and untied the knot slowly, revealing a stack of delicate papers, most folded and worn through at the creases. "They were my mother's," she said. "Recipes mostly, bits of her handwriting too. She died before Sadie was born." Elijah stepped closer, careful not to crowd her. "She teach you to cook?" She tried. "I didn't pay much mind. I was too busy thinking I'd marry someone who'd never expect much from me." He brushed a thumb across the edge of one paper. "You've done more than most would." "She used to bake a molasses cake every Christmas. I don't remember how it tasted, just how it smelled. Like cloves and warmth." She looked up. "I'd like to try it if I can read her notes well enough. Then we'll try it." They spent the next 2 days coaxing the stove to hold steady heat. Adeline measured slowly, lips moving as she rayed. Elijah helped grind the spices, his hands dusted with flour by the end of it. The cake turned out dense and uneven, but the scent filled every room. Sadie woke just as they pulled it from the stove and clapped her hands once, delighted by the smell alone. That evening, after Sadie had gone to bed with sticky fingers and a crumb on her cheek, Adeline stood beside Elijah on the porch, 2 mugs of boiled coffee between them. The moon cast a pale blue light over the snow, and somewhere far off, an owl called once and went quiet again. "I never thought I'd feel useful," she said. "Not without being told what to do. You found your own way. I was afraid I wouldn't, that I'd come here and fail at everything. You didn't." Elijah looked over at her, voice steady. "You built something here." She turned toward him. "It's not just the house that feels like home now." He reached for her hand. Her fingers were cold, but they tightened around his. Neither of them spoke for a while. The wind passed through the trees, lifting the snow in soft spirals. "I've been thinking," he said at last, "about the land. The deed's in my name, but it shouldn't just be mine." She blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean I want you to have it too, not because you're here now, because I want you here always." Her lips parted, but no sound came. Then slowly she stepped closer, placing her free hand against his chest. "I didn't come out here to marry again," she said, "but I've found more than I ever asked for." He bent and kissed her gently, his other hand resting at her waist. She kissed him back, sure and certain, the kind of kiss that didn't ask or promise, it simply was. Inside, the fire burned low and Sadie stirred once beneath the quilt, then stilled again. Adeline rested her head against Elijah's shoulder, her breath warm against his coat. He didn't need her to say the words. He already knew they would stay. And they would build more rows of beans in spring, fresh bread in the fall. A life stitched together not from perfect moments, but from the quiet ones, the ones earned. And none of them would ever be alone again. The thaw came slow that year. By early March, the snow had begun to pull back from the fields, leaving behind patches of matted grass and brittle stalks from the season before. The creek ran higher with the melt, and the air carried the scent of wet earth and pine bark, raw and clean. Elijah stood at the edge of the pasture fence, eyeing the ground where the garden would go. The frost had lifted in spots, the soil dark and ready beneath it. Behind him, Adeline stepped out carrying the seed sack she'd stitched from leftover muslin. Her boots left prints in the softening earth, and her braid hung over one shoulder streaked with sunlight. "I found the turnip seeds," she said. "And the beans you set aside." He nodded. "We'll need to watch the ground for another week. Still gets cold at night." "I don't mind waiting. I just like knowing it's coming." He turned toward her, leaning against the post. "You always this patient," she gave a quiet breath. "I used to be, before things turned hard, but since we've been here, I think I'm remembering how." Sadie's voice called from inside, muffled through the open door. She'd started mimicking the way Elijah called the mule from the barn, loud and drawn out, and the sound made Adeline laugh in spite of herself. "I should keep her from chasing the chickens again," she said, brushing her hand over Elijah's coat sleeve. "She's convinced they're supposed to follow her." "She's got spirit," he said. "She does." She hesitated, fingers still resting on his arm. "I've been thinking about teaching again." He straightened slightly. "You taught before." "Only for a bit, before I married, just reading and numbers." "But it mattered to me." She looked up. "I don't know what a school would look like here, just a few children scattered across homesteads, but I could ride out twice a week, if the snow stays gone." "You ought to do it," he said, "if it gives you something that's yours." She studied his face. "Would you mind me gone part of the time?" He shook his head. "Long as you come home." That night, After Sadie had gone to sleep curled under the quilt with one hand still gripping a carved horse Elijah had whittled, Adeline lit the oil lamp in their room and sat beside him, folding a small length of parchment. "I wrote a letter to the preacher," she said, "asking if he knows anyone else out this way with children needing lessons. I figure it's the first step." Elijah looked at the paper. "You want to send it in with me next trip to town?" "Yes, and I was thinking." She folded the parchment twice. "If we're going to stay, really stay, I'd like to marry proper, not just be here." He looked at her for a long time. "You don't need a preacher to be mine." "I know, but I want it. For Sadie's sake too, and for me." "I'll stand with you in front of whoever you want," he said. "Any day." They married beneath the cottonwoods just after the thaw broke for good. The preacher came up from town, his boots still caked from the ride out. He read the words from a little leather book. But it was the look Elijah gave her that bound it all together, solid, steady, and full of the quiet reverence he'd carried toward her since the day she stepped down from the stage. Sadie stood beside them with a crown of early violets on her head, gripping Elijah's hand like it had always been hers to hold. Adeline wore her mother's brooch pinned at her collar and didn't try to hide the tears that slipped free when Elijah spoke his vow. That night, they sat on the porch after the others had gone, the handful of neighbors who'd come, the preacher, even the man who ran the mercantile and brought dried apples as a gift. The sky above them stretched wide and black, scattered with stars. Adeline leaned into Elijah's side, her head tucked beneath his chin. "I never thought I'd feel chosen," she said. "You weren't just chosen," he said. "You were waited for." She turned her face to his. "So were you." They didn't speak again for a while. There was no need to. In time, the garden grew. The beans came up first, then the turnips, and later tomatoes, stubborn and bright. Adeline rode out on Wednesdays and Fridays, her satchel packed with slates and chalk, and Sadie rode behind her some days, her arms wrapped around her waist. Elijah kept the land steady, fencing, tending, riding out with the mule when supplies ran low, but always came home before dark. He never missed a meal, and he never let the fire die before they came in for the night. They built a second bedroom that summer, not out of distance, but to make space for more. When the baby came that autumn, a boy with Adeline's dark eyes and Elijah's quiet, Sadie held him first and said, "He smells like biscuits." Adeline laughed, tired and full of joy. Elijah kissed her temple and whispered her name like it was something sacred. They named him Samuel after Elijah's father. Everything stayed that way, slow and honest and stitched together through care. No grand declarations, no need for them. Just a life built from the hard-earned quiet between storms. And every night when the house settled and the children slept, Elijah would turn toward her and say, "You still sure?" And every time, Adeline would answer, "Always."